where anybody has ever suggested that we should pull back or do less in these communities. And to be honest, I think there's a mountain of goodwill within the Rudd and Gillard governments as well to do more in this space. I'm sure the Albanese government's got goodwill to do good things in Indigenous communities, but the fact is that we haven't succeeded. And so all of us share the blame for that, including Indigenous leaders, not just the members of Parliament and the leaders of the last few decades, but we're further behind on some of these indicators. And when you talk about a very high occurrence of sexually transmitted diseases within children within Indigenous communities, or these stories of kids having to lock themselves in shipping containers to make it through the hours of darkness without being sexually assaulted, I mean, that is an appalling indictment. And so we should do more. And people who say, well, we've got to do the symbolism, and that's, through the acknowledgement to country in Canberra at government departments, that's going to resolve these issues for these kids in these communities. Well, it hasn't. And so, yes, the symbolism is important, but I want to see the practical outcomes. And I want to support the government in policies that will make a difference in these kids' lives so that they can enjoy the upbringing that most of us have in capital cities and in regional towns around the country.
We'll always run out of time. So just before I go to ask you this, I mean, there are now 10 Indigenous members of the federal parliament. Does anyone know, do you know what is meant by having a voice, an Indigenous voice in the Constitution? I don't know what that means. I've asked Jacinta Price. She doesn't know what it means. Tony Abbott said, I'm not sure what it means. Do you know what that means? And if you've got 10 elected Indigenous people into the parliament, isn't that an Indigenous voice?
Well, Alan, I think this is why the government needs to explain what it is they're proposing. I think some Australians, not all Australians to be honest, will have heard of this proposal of the voice, and very few Australians, particularly Australians outside of Canberra, could tell you what it is that the government's proposing. And the reason for that is that I don't think the government yet knows the detail themselves. I haven't seen the legal advice about what implications it would have for legislation that was passed through the parliament in relation to health or education or law and order issues. I haven't seen any advice on what it is that the government's proposing in terms of where these people would come from and how they would be elected. But the government's working through all of that, and I respect that. But they need to explain it not just to the opposition, but to the Australian people, so that we can form a judgment on whether there's support or something there we can support, or some element. I've just been open-minded in saying, well, let's see what they're proposing, but at the moment there's no detail.
No, absolutely. Listen, we've got to talk off, and there are many issues we can canvass, but look, congratulations, you're a breath of fresh air. And as I said, the base of the Liberal Party is very excited about where you might take them. So thank you for your time tonight. Hope we can talk again soon.